couple things to go over today. I hope to get through both of them. If not, if we don't, we don't. All right. It's always another week. And the two things I want to go over are this. Open. Remember last time, a query using the method syntax. I don't know why I closed it. I'm just going to open up again. We showed a query using the method syntax, and we are now going to show the same query using query syntax. And to refresh your memory is a course roster where we click on roster and we see the course, the department, instructor or instructors, and a list of the students. So that's 2 instructors, multiple students, and so on. We have a different version of it that does essentially the same thing. And I'm going to show you the way that I came up with. I thought was the simplest, most straightforward way. There could be other ways too. It's the advantage. These query languages are pretty flexible, and therefore I'm not going to pretend to say that this is the only way to do it. I present these 2 methods to you for a couple reasons. First of all, so that you can get a taste of both of them and maybe decide on which one that you like better and which one you want to pursue. Do remember that if you're in a project, you may be required to change someone else's code. All right. And that means that if they did something a different way, you should at least have a understanding of it, so to know how to change it and to make changes to it and so on. So let's look at this roster 1. All right. Roster 1. That's the first thing we're going to go over. Let's talk about that first, so we'll go on to number 2. All right. Did things a little bit differently in this case. I'm pulling, instead of pulling a course object, I'm pulling just specific attributes. And again, I'm not sure if this is a good way or not, but this is the way I took. And I have specific attributes to pull up the course name, an attribute for the department name, an attribute for the list of instructors that are teaching the course. Remember that multiple people can be assigned to teach the same course, and therefore it needs to be a list. And then finally, a list of students for that course. Now, we get past an ID, it's like we did in the other version, right? Because this is a roster for one class. So in order to determine the roster for one class, we need to know what class that we want. And the way that you identify what class that you want is by the ID of the class. So this Linq gets created on the index page is using the course ID as the routing ID for the link to roster 1. So therefore you'll see instructors / roster 1 / 5 or whatever the ID of the selected person is. And that ID is going to be on the query string. It's listed as being optional, but in a way it really isn't, because if you don't have an ID, you can't really do anything. So if the ID is null, you simply return. I've created a variable called course list. It's going to pull specific items out of it, out of the query. And this is the query syntax for it. If you've ever done any SQL statements, this looks closely like SQL, but it's kind of rearranged, all right, a little bit. First thing we do is we identify what we're pulling it from. So from C in context courses, right? that essentially is saying that we're pulling it from the course table in the database. Where c.course ID equals ID. E we got passed in here, picking only that course that matches up with the ID. And what are we selecting from that? We're selecting the title. We're setting the title variable in course stuff to see the course's title, the department to department name, and the instructor to the list of instructors. Right? If you remember, when we look at the model, see that a course has a department associated with it and a list of instructors. Student stuff, we're pulling from the enrollments table. Notice we don't have to join with we don't have to join it. We don't have to say include to include the other tables. Apparently with the syntax method, it does that for you. So here we're saying we want all the enrollment, everything from the enrollment database that matches the course ID, and give me full name of the student and store it in a property called student. We're then going to say for each item in course stuff was this. Should only be one, right? But give me that title, give me the department, and give me the instructors. So we're retrieving these things, the title, the department, and the instructors. My guess is that it knows based on the fact that we wanted the department name and the instructors to include that in. That's probably why we don't have to say anything. So now we've populated the course name attribute, the department name attribute, and the instructors, the list of instructors. Here we're looking at each enrollment record, and we're adding the student's name to a list of students. Student list, which is a list of string. Now again, if I were to do this now, I'd do it a little bit different, and maybe I'll try to do that after I'll do this I'll try to revise this at the very end of class if we make it through the other things that I want to do today. If not, this still gives you a taste of how to do query syntax. So we now have a student list that has a list of the names. It's simply a list of strings. We have a collection of instructors, and we have a string for department name and a string for course name. And we can then use that on this page. Output. From the model, give me the course name. From the model, give me the department name. From the model, loop through the list of instructions and give me that instructor's full name. And then we do the same thing through loop through the student list and come up with the list which we have. Name, list of names. All right, that's the first thing I wanted to go over today. And again, I might revise that because I think I could do a better job with it than I did when I originally created it a couple semesters back. All right, the other thing I want to look at is this functionality. And I'm going to paste the URL to a Word document at each step. because this instructor page works in 3 different modes. All right. The first is when we originally display page, we get a list of instructors. So when we originally go with this URL, we get a list of instructors. When we select an instructor, when we click the select link, right? It does a couple things. First of all, it changes the style for the selected row, and it shows a list of courses taught by that instructor. Now look at the URL. The URL now has an ID after it. It's the equivalent of saying ID equals 5. So now we've given the ID of the instructor that we want to see details on. We could go one more level deep, and this shows a list of instructors. Highlights the selected row. Shows courses for selected instructor. The last step is, what if we select a course? So we click select on the course. We get a list of students enrolled in that course. And let's look at what our URL is here. URL here has not just the instructor ID, it has a course ID. So it shows this, highlights the selected row, shows courses for selected instructor, shows students for selected course, and highlights the selected course. So this is when the page initially loads. This is if we select and by select, I mean select, hit the select link next to the instructor. And this is if we select a course. So this page works in 3 different modes. Either get just a list of instructors, a list of instructors along with their selected courses, or a list of instructors with the selected instructors courses. And then if we select the course, we can see the students enrolled in that course. This all happens in one page. So those of you, I know I have a couple people that are in CISS243. We did something real similar to this in class today. This is very similar to a postback for those of you that have had CISS232 or are familiar with the page. We have our server-side code that looks at stuff on the URL and knows what to do, knows what actions to take, what to retrieve, and what to display, and so on. So let's go and look at that functionality. Let me close these other 2. Let me open. Instructors, index, page model, and CSS243. Okay. This all happens on the onGet method, right? Why is it an onGet method? Well, it's an onGet method because we are passing the data on the URL. That's what this stuff means. This means that this is the URL, this is data we're going to pass on it. We're going to pass, and we've seen this before when we looked at when we looked at the details of a selected item, or when we've gone to edit or delete an item. So we're using the onGet because we're pulling from the query string. We haven't posted to this the way that you post back when you edit an item and click save. So everything happens on the onGet method. So I create a new instructor index data. Well, what is that? What is instructor index data? See if I could find it here. Right here. It's a class I've created that potentially could contain all of the data that I want to show on the index. So this shows no, that's not what I'm looking for. That's the wrong one. Where are you hiding? There we go. Instructor index data is in a subfolder of models. So it's like a model. It's a model that contains a few things. It contains a list of instructors, right? We need a list of instructors because this is the index page. We show a list of instructors. We show that regardless of what mode we're in. We can potentially be showing a list of courses. So we have in this model a list of courses. And finally, we have a list of enrollments because we can have in the index also a list of enrollments. So this represents the 3 levels. At any point in the process, 1, 2, or 3 of these lists have been set. This gets set every time. This gets set if you select an instructor. This gets set if you select an instructor and then select a course. So these are the things that we're going to be displaying on our page. Excuse me. So we have, normally when we had listings like this, where we just had a simple listing, we would have a list of courses or a list of departments or a list of students. Here we have a list of, or here we have rather, I'm sorry, my mistake. Here we have a single instructor index data object. And that object contains those 3 lists. We're going to fill in different pieces of that object through each step of the process. So first thing we do is we create our new instructor data. We create an instructor data object here. We create this object up here, the instructor data. First thing we're going to do is we're going to fill in the instructors in that list. And this is what we do. We're pulling the instructors from the list of instructors. We're including the office assignment. We're including the courses. We're including the department for those courses. And we're sorting it by last name. So when we're done with this statement, this object, this instructor data object, which contains each of those three lists, when we finish that statement, this list got populated. This list got populated that includes a list of instructors. And for the instructor, we've also included the courses and the office assignments for that instructor. So when we're done with this statement, we have in our instructor data an instructor list that includes the courses, department, and the office assignment. Department, by the way, is a department for each course. We do that. We then look to see, is ID equal to null? Or actually, we look to see if ID is not equal to null. Not equal to null means what? It means that we're in one of these two scenarios. We've either selected an instructor or selected an instructor and a course. So we need to do more. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to fill in our list of courses. Now, we could go back and retrieve this again from the database, but this actually works in an intelligent way. We get the value of the ID. We have already retrieved all the instructors and put them in this list, in our instructor data's instructor list. So what we're doing is we're pulling out that instructor. So these two statements give us, in the variable instructor, the instructor that has been selected. Why? Because I'm looking for an instructor that has that ID. Exactly what I'm doing here. So this has a list. This has a list of all instructors. This will give us a list of, or this will give us a single instructor that was selected because it uses the ID and picks that instructor out of that list. So we want the courses for that instructor, and that's going to fill in our instructor index data courses. If there's an ID, we have now pulled that instructor and pulled the courses for that instructor and populated this second thing. Finally, we do that if the course ID is not null. We're going to do something very similar. We're going to look at that value of the ID. We're going to pull out of the instructor data's list of courses the selected course. And for each enrollment in selected course, we're going to look up the student. So this populates for the course that we've selected a list of students. We don't do that initially because that could get messy. Because there could be potentially a lot of students in a lot of courses. So we wait until they've selected a course to populate the student. And then we set the instructor data enrollments equal to the selected courses enrollments. So we fill in this all the time. We fill in this if there's an ID, an instructor ID. We fill in this if there's a course ID. Now let's look at the index. For every item in this object's list of instructors, we're going to loop through and we're going to display that items. Each item is going to be the next instructor. We're going to display the instructor's last name, first and middle initial, hire date, office location, and a list of the courses that they have. It's kind of a little redundant. If I was doing this, I wouldn't display a list of courses, but they display a list of the courses for each instructor. And then if you hit select, they display that list of courses again. I'm not really sure why they did that. Anyhow, they did it by looping through all the courses in the list of instructors in that selected instructor's course. Now, how did it look different? How did we make it look different? If we have a match of the ID, we set the class equal to selected row or table success. And that's what gives us a difference of appearance. We could look in the root, CSS. Okay, I lied, it's not there. How we set the class equals select a row. That must be something that is in Bootstrap, would be my guess. Then, that is giving us the list of instructors, and that will always execute, because we're always going to have a list of instructors. We then look to see, was the list of courses populated? If it is, then we do the same thing we did before, except we loop through every course in that course list in the instructor data object. And we set the class to selected row of the course that was selected. We only do that if the course ID matches the selected course ID. We display this, remember, if we've selected an instructor or if we have selected an instructor in a course. First time through, when we've just selected the instructor, none of these are going to get that style because we don't have a course ID. We display this information for each course. Finally, last round, if the enrollments list are filled in, we do the exact same thing except with the instructor data's enrollment list and display the full name of the student and the grade. Now, this is fairly involved, all right, but the idea is the same in all cases. In all cases, we're displaying a list. And how many lists we display depend on what was on the query string. The instructor list, we're always retrieving that. So the instructor list in this object always gets populated. This gets populated if there's a selected instructor or a selected instructor in selected course. Finally, this one only gets populated if there's a selected course. And then in the display portion of it, we look to see which list got populated. And if the list got populated, in other words, the list is not null, then we go and display the contents of that list. So we do that first for the courses, then for the enrollments for the course. Are there any questions about that? Take some time to review it. I know this isn't simple. All right. First time I looked at it, I was scratching my head a bit. All right. So take some time, review it on your own. If it will help, run through debug. Put a breakpoint in there and see what values are set and when it hits that particular breakpoint and so on. That could be useful, but study this so that you understand it. Okay, I would like to take a shot to improve that second query that I had up, the roster one. If this doesn't go well, I'm going to edit it out of the recorded lecture, just so you know. Okay, change this to retrieve a course object. Retrieve a department object. Actually, I'm going to just retrieve a course object, retrieve a department object, retrieve a list of instructors, we're going to keep that, and retrieve a list of students. Okay. I'm going to retrieve course C. Retrieve department, C department, instructors, C instructors. Enrollments, C enrollments. Okay. Grabbing the object instead of individual fields from it, which is usually better. So okay. This is the start of it. I am at a standstill. I'm not sure why this is giving me a syntax error. What I will do is I will work on this to hopefully improve it. And if I get a better result, I'll post it and include that. The whole idea is it's better to fill in objects than to fill in strings. The reason for that is that gives you more flexibility. If you fill in the entire object, you can then display any attribute that you want. Whereas if you fill in a string, if you decided to pull another attribute from that object, you have to go and add another string to your model and all this. Here we can since we're pulling the object, we can pull anything we want to that. So I'm going to go and I'm going to save this. I'm going to email it to myself. And I will work on it after class and I will post the results that I get. Are there any questions at this point? All right, we'll either see you in lab or we will see you next week.